My world turned upside down the day I lost my father. That morning started just like any other. Dad kissed me goodbye before heading to his job at the construction company. He was the site manager and always left early, steel-toed boots thumping on the kitchen floor like clockwork. Mom barely looked up from her phone as he walked out the door. I remember staring at her, just wondering when they had become so distant. They used to be different, warmer, happier. I'm Pink. That was the last morning I ever saw my father alive. He collapsed that afternoon on site. A massive heart attack, they said. I was in math class when the principal came into the room and asked me to follow her. I remember every second of that walk to the office, every echo of my shoes down the hallway, the pit growing in my stomach like something inside me already knew. Mom was already there. Her makeup was perfect, not a smudge in sight, and when she said, "Your father's gone, Pink," her voice didn't waver. Not once. I broke down. I was on my knees, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, and she just patted my back, like she was brushing lint off a jacket. That evening, I overheard her talking to her best friend, Linda. I wasn't trying to listen, but in our thin-walled suburban home, her voice carried loud and clear. "Actually, Linda," she said with a little laugh that turned my stomach, "this might be for the best." I froze. I held my breath, hand over my mouth. Being a widow is so much more respectable than being divorced. Plus, I get to keep everything without the hassle of lawyers. And then she laughed. She actually laughed. I know. I'll play the grieving widow at the funeral. I've already picked out the perfect black dress. I sat on the staircase, knees shaking, silent tears running down my cheeks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't want to believe it. That woman, the one in the kitchen talking about dresses and money like she hadn't just lost her husband. Was that really my mother? At the funeral, while others wept and offered their condolences, she put on the performance of a lifetime. She wore her designer dress, dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, and let people call her so strong. But Aunt Sarah, my dad's sister, saw right through her. She didn't say much, just stood at the edge of the crowd, arms folded, shaking her head. Sarah had always known how Mom treated Dad. I think she even tried to talk to him about it a few times, but Dad was loyal to a fault. He always gave Mom the benefit of the doubt, even when she didn't deserve it. Within 3 months, Mom had a new man in her life. His name was Richard Thompson. He was polite, polished, and came with 2 kids from a previous marriage, Brandon and Emma. Brandon was 11, Emma was 10. When they visited, Mom turned into a version of herself I barely recognized. She cooked big dinners, laughed too loud, told Richard he was a godsend. It was like watching someone rehearse for a role. One night, while we were all sitting awkwardly in the living room, Mom leaned in close to Richard, her hand wrapped in his. "Pink, sweetheart," she said with a sugary voice I hadn't heard in years. "Richard and I have something to tell you." I already knew what was coming. The way they looked at each other like teenagers, it was obvious. "We're getting married," she announced, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. "Isn't it wonderful? You'll have a new father and siblings." I forced a smile. "That's great, Mom. Congratulations." Inside, my stomach was turning. Richard gave me a smile, but his eyes didn't match it. And his kids? They looked at me like I was a smudge on their shiny lives. Every visit, they treated me like I was in their way. Later that night, I called Aunt Sarah and cried until my voice was hoarse. She didn't say much, just listened patiently, like she always did. Then she said something I've carried with me ever since. "Sweetie, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Remember that." Brandon and Emma moved in a week after the honeymoon. Just like that, my life changed. They took the best rooms, including my old playroom, which Emma turned into her art studio. I protested, but Mom brushed me off. "Don't be selfish, Pink. We need to make them feel welcome." From then on, everything was about Brandon and Emma. Mom helped Emma with her homework, went to Brandon's soccer games, and talked about how lucky we were to have such a wonderful family. Meanwhile, I ate dinner alone most nights, usually microwaved leftovers or cereal. It wasn't just about being left out. It was the way she looked at Richard, like he hung the moon and stars. I'd never seen her look at Dad that way. Anytime Brandon or Emma needed something, it magically appeared. New cleats? Done. Art classes? Of course. Meanwhile, if I asked for pencils, I got an eye roll and a lecture about budgeting. Eventually, I stopped asking for anything. They took weekend trips, camping, sightseeing, hotel stays. Nothing fancy, but I was never invited. "You'll just be bored," Mom said once, tossing snacks into a bag for her stepkids. "Besides, someone needs to feed the cat." So I'd go to Aunt Sarah's. Her little cottage, filled with plants and the smell of cinnamon, became more of a home than my own house ever was. She never had kids, but she treated me like her own. We'd watch movies, bake cookies, or just sit on the porch with hot chocolate. "This isn't right, Pink," she said one night, watching me unpack my overnight bag. "A mother shouldn't play favorites like this." I just shrugged. "At least I have you, Aunt Sarah." By the time I turned 16, I'd already started dreaming about college. Business management was my passion, and I spent nights researching schools, making lists, highlighting deadlines in neon yellow. One night at dinner, I waited for the right moment. Everyone seemed to be in a good mood, so I took a deep breath. "Mom, I wanted to talk about college applications." Her fork clattered against the plate. She blinked. "College, Pink, we can't afford college. We need to focus on Brandon and Emma's future." I stared at her, stunned. Richard kept chewing. Emma smirked. Brandon looked smug. "But what about Dad's money?" I asked later, cornering her in the kitchen. "He had life insurance, and he'd been saving for years." Her face hardened. "I've spent that money taking care of you," she snapped. "Food, clothes, shelter. Did you think all that was free? Stop being so arrogant, Pink. You can't just demand things from me." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Because the truth was, she hadn't been spending anything on me. I knew it. She knew it. But saying it out loud made her uncomfortable, so she twisted the truth to fit her narrative. That weekend, I went to Aunt Sarah's again. We sat at the kitchen table, the scent of coffee and lemon cake filling the air. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her mug. When I finished, she got up silently and disappeared into her study. I heard drawers open and close. Then she returned with a thick envelope. "Your dad came to see me 2 weeks before he died," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "He seemed off, like something was bothering him. He asked me to keep this safe for you, for when you were ready." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a bank statement, a savings account, in my name. Aunt Sarah was the trustee. My dad had been secretly putting money aside for years. "He said your mom had been acting strange," she explained softly. "He wanted to make sure your future was secure. He was worried." I cried, not quiet tears, but big, gut-wrenching sobs. He'd been protecting me even after death. "We can't tell Mom," I whispered. Aunt Sarah nodded. "She'll never know." The day of the birthday dinner came faster than I expected. I woke up that morning with a sense of calm and clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew exactly who I was, and more importantly, who I wasn't. I slipped on the dress I'd chosen for the night. Simple, elegant, black Chanel. Not flashy, not loud, just tasteful. The kind of outfit that didn't need to scream to be heard. I paired it with heels I'd worn to a corporate gala the month before, the same pair I'd bought with my first promotion bonus. It wasn't just an outfit, it was armor. And I didn't drive myself. I called a taxi. Not because I didn't have a car. Oh, I had a car. A beautiful black Mercedes AMG sitting in the garage of my downtown apartment. But somehow showing up in a taxi would say everything I needed it to. Let them think what they wanted. LeBlanc was exactly what I'd expected. Pretentious. Expensive in that trying too hard kind of way. White tablecloths, hostesses who spoke in whispers, overpriced seafood flown in frozen and reheated to look fresh. A place designed to impress people who'd never really dined out in their lives. The hostess guided me to a private dining room. I could already hear the laughter before we turned the corner. Mom's high-pitched cackle, Emma's sugary voice, Brandon bragging about something or other. When I stepped inside, the party was already in full swing. Mom sat at the head of the table, wearing a sequined gown that sparkled under the chandelier. Her hair was done up in tight curls, lips painted bright red, and her earrings sparkled like tiny disco balls. Richard was beside her, looking like a man who'd spent the afternoon in a tanning bed and an ego salon. Brandon and Emma flanked them like royalty. The rest of the table was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in over a decade. Aunt Linda, who used to pinch my cheeks too hard. Cousin Rachel, who always made everything a competition. Distant cousins and old neighbors, all sipping wine and trying too hard to be interesting. When Mom saw me, she paused for a split second, her eyes flickering over my outfit. "Oh, Pink, you came," she said, barely disguising the surprise in her voice. You could have dressed up a bit more, don't you think? I smiled and took my seat at the far end of the table. I watched, silent, as the night unfolded like a badly directed play. Aunt Linda gifted her a candle set. "It's from that nice shop at the mall," she said proudly. Mom gasped like she'd just received rare jewels. "Oh, Linda, it's beautiful." Cousin Rachel gave her a spa gift card for a day of pampering. More squeals, more exaggerated gratitude. Then came Brandon and Emma's big moment. They stood up together, all smug smiles and fake humility. "Mom," Brandon said, his voice too smooth, "Emma and I pooled our money to get you something really special." Emma pulled out her phone and held up a picture. "It's a 65-inch smart TV, already delivered and mounted in the living room." The room erupted with applause. Mom actually started crying. "My wonderful, generous children. I can't believe you did this. You must have saved for months." The performance was Oscar-worthy. And then everyone turned to me. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box. Just a box. No fanfare, no speech. Mom stared at it like it was ticking. "What's this supposed to be?" she snapped. "Open it and see," I said gently. She didn't. Instead, her face turned red, her voice rising. "This is exactly what I expected from you," she hissed. "You show up here in that plain dress, probably the only nice thing you own, and a taxi no less. Now you give me this tiny box? What's in there, Pink? A gift card to McDonald's?" She laughed. Brandon and Emma snickered behind their hands. Then she threw the box across the table. It bounced once, then slid to a stop near someone's wine glass. A few guests looked away. Some looked downright entertained. Richard just kept eating, barely reacting. I calmly reached for the box, brushing off a crumb stuck to the wrapping paper. Then I looked directly at her. "You know what's funny, Mom?" I said, my voice steady. "In this little box is a receipt for a luxury vacation to the Maldives. 2 weeks, first-class flights, 5-star resort, total value $15,000. The silence in the room was instant and total. Emma's fork dropped with a loud clatter. Mom's face went pale. That's not possible," she sputtered. "You couldn't afford something like that. You're lying." I laughed, quietly but with enough sting to make her flinch. "You'd know whether I could afford it or not if you'd shown any interest in my life these past 12 years. But let me catch you up." I stood. "I'm a senior director at Reynolds Marketing Group. I own my own apartment in the city. And that taxi you mocked? I took it because I didn't want to leave my Mercedes parked in this neighborhood." Brandon's jaw dropped. Emma went pale. I picked up the box and slid it back into my purse. "But since you clearly don't want anything from me, and I wouldn't want to ruin your evening with something so beneath your standards, I'll take my gift and go." I started walking toward the door. "Enjoy your TV," I added over my shoulder. "I hear the resolution's almost as good as the one in my home theater." The click of my heels echoed in the silence behind me. Nobody followed. Nobody tried to stop me. And I didn't look back. I headed straight to Aunt Sarah's. She was waiting up for me, 2 cups of tea already steeping on the coffee table. I sat down and told her everything, from the moment I walked into the restaurant to the way Mom had thrown the box across the table. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly, then let out a long breath. "Some people never change," she said softly. "Your mother's always been more interested in appearances than people. That's her loss." We were still talking when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered. "Pink, sweetheart." Mom's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I've been thinking about what happened tonight." "Have you?" I said coldly. "Yes, and I realize now that I may have been hasty. If you're still willing to give me that gift, I'd love to accept it. I think we could use this as a fresh start. I want to be part of your life again. We're family, after all." I paused, let her words hang in the air. "No," I said finally. "We're not family, we're just people who share DNA, and you don't want me, you want the vacation." I hung up. The calls didn't stop. When I blocked her number, she started calling from others, her cell, Richard's, even the house phone. And when I ignored those, the messages started rolling in. "Pink, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I've been thinking about your job. Maybe you could help Brandon get started in marketing. He's very creative." Another message. "Emma says she'd love to intern at your company. It would look great on her applications." Then another. "The house needs repairs. Since you're doing so well." Each message was more desperate than the last. Guilt, flattery, manipulation, even veiled threats. "I'm your mother. How can you ignore me?" "You've become such a successful woman. You should be proud." "I'll tell everyone you abandoned me." It was like watching someone try to bargain at a pawn shop. But what she'd lost wasn't money. It was me. Aunt Sarah called me a few days later. Her voice was laced with disbelief and just a hint of amusement. She showed up at my house, she said, not even needing to clarify who. Dressed like she was going to Sunday brunch at the country club, demanded I give her your address. I sat on my sofa, swirling tea in my mug, already guessing the ending. What did you tell her? Aunt Sarah chuckled. I told her to get off my property or I'd call the police. You should have seen her face. She kept going on and on about how she had a right to know where her daughter lives. I leaned my head back and sighed. She gave up that right a long time ago. She sure did. Apparently, after being refused entry and told off on the front porch, Mom had stormed back to her car, ranting about how ungrateful we both were. The neighbors definitely heard everything. Not that I cared. Let the world see her true colors. Aunt Sarah's voice turned serious for a moment. Just be careful, Pink. She seems desperate, and desperate people can be unpredictable. I know, I said, but I've already blocked her on everything. Socials, phone, even work email. And security at my building knows not to let her in. After we hung up, I walked through my apartment, my space, my sanctuary. I ran my fingers over the modern countertops, the carefully chosen art on the walls, the sleek black leather couch I'd saved months for. I looked out at the city lights and remembered the girl who once cried alone in her bedroom while her mother praised another child. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built a life worth living, on her own. And despite the scars, she had found something even more precious. Peace. My phone lit up again. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. This time the voicemail was different, short, almost cold. You can ignore me all you want, Pink, but I'm still your mother, and someday you're going to regret this. I deleted it without listening to the end. But she had given me a gift, even if she didn't know it. She'd taught me a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. Family is not about DNA. It's about love, loyalty, respect. And I already had a family. I had Aunt Sarah. That evening, I did something I'd been planning since the night of the birthday party. I called the travel agency. Hi, I said. I need to make a name change on a vacation package. Of course, ma'am, the agent replied. To whom should we transfer the booking? Sarah Carter, I said, smiling. 2 weeks in the Maldives, first-class flights, private beachside villa, all for the woman who had loved me like a daughter when the one who gave birth to me couldn't be bothered. When I told Aunt Sarah, she looked like she might cry. Pink, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, I said, placing the envelope with the confirmation in her hands. You deserve this more than anyone. But it's so much money, and you've given me so much more. You've been my anchor, my light, my home. Let me give you something beautiful. She hugged me tight, that warm, all-encompassing kind of hug that tells you everything will be okay. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Months passed. Work was going great. I had been invited to speak at conferences, mentoring new hires, and working on projects that would shape the future of the company. I traveled. I grew. I healed. One Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee on my balcony when I saw a message request pop up on a new social media app I barely used. It was from Emma. The message was short, just 5 words. Can we talk, please? I stared at the screen for a long time. A younger version of me might have replied, might have felt obligated, might have seen it as a chance to reconnect, to build something that had never really been there. But the woman I had become? She closed the app and went back to her coffee. I didn't need closure from people who were never open in the first place. Holidays came and went, each one better than the last. Aunt Sarah and I turned Thanksgiving into a gourmet adventure, trying recipes from different countries each year. We watched old musicals on Christmas Eve and toasted with sparkling cider. We created our own traditions, and they were ours. She asked me once, quietly, "Do you ever think about them?" I knew who she meant. Sometimes, I admitted, but not with sadness, just curiosity, like remembering a movie I saw a long time ago, one that didn't end well. That was the truth. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. I simply didn't wish to go back, because forward was where the light was. Years later, I found myself on a different kind of journey. I had just accepted a new executive role in a different city. A chance to grow even further, stretch my wings, lead in a way I had only dreamed about. Before I left, Aunt Sarah and I sat on her porch one last time. You've become everything your dad hoped you'd be, she said quietly. I just wish he could see it. He does, she said firmly. He sees every bit of it, and he's proud. I wiped away a tear, not from pain, but from love. Deep, enduring love. The kind that doesn't need grand gestures or loud declarations. The kind that just is. Sometimes I still think about that little girl who stood on the stairs, hand over her mouth, listening to her mother laugh about widowhood. I want to hug her. I want to tell her, it's going to be okay. You'll get out. You'll grow. You'll shine. And she did. Pink did. Not because of the pain, but in spite of it. She didn't let the past define her. She let it fuel her. And that, to me, is the greatest success of all.